after that. So, who wants to go first?
I want you to settle in and be quiet.
There we go. See, somebody taking leadership there, Darrin. Is it 4 or is it 2?
I'm hoping it's 2. Okay, before I get started, I just want to say thank you to all the van drivers yesterday. I mean, that's pretty hard to stay sober, watch the rest of us drink, and you got to drive for 2 hours. I mean, so thank you very much. Do appreciate that. All right, so Utah's electrification. I'm going to be honest with you. There's that movie called Field of Dreams. And in that movie, they're like, hey, if you build it, they will come. Well, I've been doing the opposite with electrification. I'm like, if I ignore it, maybe it'll go away. But as I learned yesterday from Henry, our guys are building out huge infrastructure in Utah. I guess we're one of the main ones to try to apply for the grant. So I guess I can't forget about it and hope it goes away. The Department of Administrative Services is the one that is over this for Utah, so I stole their presentation. If I can find it. Honestly, they could have it. Nope, not that one. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll just try the thumb drive. See if that comes up. Crap. Oh, here we go. God, it says State of Utah right on it. Okay, State of Utah. So we were calling it the ATV process, and it's an advanced technology vehicle. So it's not necessarily EV in Utah, it's ATV. What is an ATV? These are vehicles that are either powered by electricity solely, or they're like hybrids, or there's the hybrid plug-in. And these are kind of their examples. So the Toyota Prius, naturally a hybrid. The Toyota Prius Prime is a plug-in hybrid. I'll be honest, I've never seen one, and I don't think we have one in our fleet. And then there's the full electric, like the Chevy Bolt. Why are we transitioning? There was in Utah code, I think it was in 2014, we were mandated to come up with a plan of action for the poor air quality. So living in the Wasatch Front, we're in a bowl, great big bowl, and all the emissions stay in that bowl all winter long. And so the air gets really bad. I can't remember, I want to say we're in the top 2 or 3 of the worst air in the nation. So this kind of pushed us forward into trying to do things other than the same thing we've been doing. Oh, that is a slide. Okay, where is it feasible? So I have a map later on in the slides, but the 83% of Utah's population lives between Ogden and Provo, and that's probably right around 100 miles. So all of us are right there to the east of the lake in all that area. So once you get outside of that, it's really rural. So the main parts they're focusing on are Cache Valley, which is up by Logan, Box Elder. These are all northern counties, and then Salt Lake and Utah County, which Salt Lake's in the center and Utah County's in the south. So here's a picture of the Wasatch Front. So this is the area that we're talking about. Ogden is up here, Orem is down here. There is a spot out here out to the east, which is vernal. A lot of mining, that sort of thing, not a huge amount of population, but they have the same thing. There's a huge bowl out here, so all the emissions get trapped inside that bowl. Okay, so these are where they're focusing their charging locations. So Salt Lake's got 106. I believe there is a little more population to the south in Provo, so they've got more stations down here. And then as you go up north, it gets a little less populated. But we're all just kind of stuck right here to the side of the lake. Choosing the state standard on ATVs. So it says DFL will choose a passenger car, SUV, and truck that will bring the best total cost of ownership. And they say they're going to take input from their customers. I will be honest, right now it's very limited. We ordered 2 Ford Lightnings 4 years ago and have no ETA. We don't know when we're going to get them. We do have 4 Chevy Bolts that are in our fleet, but to imagine UDOT's fleet is of about 850 light-duty vehicles. We have 4 that are all electric. The state of Utah itself owns about 7,000 vehicles that are light-duty, and I believe there were right around 100 that are either hybrid, electric, and then a few full electric. Oh, that changes by itself. Okay, so this is their flow chart on whether we're going to replace with an EV or what our options are. And kind of being in UDOT and how far spread out we are, a lot of this goes for like the higher education people. They call them campus vehicles, so they stay within a very restricted area. Where UDOT, I mean, we have guys driving from Salt Lake to Wendover, which is about 90 miles. You wouldn't be able to take a trip in one of those EVs. There's no charging out in Wendover. So as we go through this flow chart, I think probably the direction we are going to head the quickest will have to be with the hybrids. I don't think it just doesn't fit our model. We was going to try the Lightnings. In order to try the Lightnings, even at a maintenance station, we're going to have to add chargers to that maintenance stations, which we don't have now. Most of the charging in Utah is at the main complex, and I believe there's 60 chargers there. 4 fast chargers, the rest of them are the stage 2, which they're overnight charging. Telematics, they want to put telematics in each of these ATV vehicles, I guess more than anything to just try and gain some data. I mean, I feel like we're really jumping into it, and we don't really know exactly how it's going to work, right? We're listening to other states, and I'll enjoy your guys' presentation in Oregon and Washington. I mean, you guys are more further into this, and California as well. But in Utah, we just don't really understand it. So I think they want the the telematics in there to try and get a better plan. So we have take-home and commute vehicles, mostly for like shed foremen or mechanics or the emergency response folks that leave right from their house. That's one of the restrictions they're going to put on us, is they are not going to allow any of the AV or the electric EV vehicles to be take-home vehicles. Simply, I think, because they don't understand how it's going to work. I think it's going to be a little hard for them to expect you to charge the vehicle. It's your cost, right? You're plugging into your house, charging it up. I don't think they know how to quite deal with that yet. Another thing I thought was kind of funny is they're going to tell us when we're going to charge, which I get it. They're trying to save money. If you save money, it becomes more of a viable option. They're telling you not to charge on peak hours, which is kind of, I don't know, less of an incentive for me to have an EV, right? You got to go home and charge it overnight. I guess they don't want us plugging into our own stations that are at the DOT. I mean, I'm not sure how they expect that to work. So,
Don't go too
right? So these are the non-state-owned charging stations. And as you can see, up along the Wasatch Front, where we're at, is where most of them are. Once you get out of Salt Lake, I think with the grant that they're giving us, or the grant we're applying for, it's gonna get better. But this is the main I-15 corridor that goes through. This out here is very remote. This is all the stuff you see on the TV, like Canyonlands and Arches National Park, and this is all very vast area, not much out there. So I do think their focus will be from within that area. Even in Bernal, they're trying to focus in Bernal, they got one charging station. So I don't know how that's gonna work. Okay, so here's their rollout plan. 2023, which we've already went through this, and funny thing, we didn't get any EVs or any gas vehicles, even to order this year. So this kind of broke their plan. But what they want to do is purchase 10 passenger battery electric vehicles to replace outgoing hybrids. So they want to convert us from hybrids to BEVs, they're calling them. Then calendar year 24, they're going to do the same thing, except for instead of doing 10 vehicles, they're going to jump it up to 20. Mind you, we're going slow. This is 7,000 vehicles that are in this pool to replace. So we're rolling it out, but we're rolling out very slow. 2025, kind of the same thing, but they're going to step it up to 30 passenger vehicles that will be battery electric. And then they're going to start doing trucks. They're going to add 5 battery electric trucks. 2026, they're going to do the same, 30 passenger vehicles and then 5 trucks. And then calendar year 2027, same thing. So it's a slow process. I think that's where the telematics is going to come in. They can get more of a feel of what they're doing, where they're going with it. And sorry, that's all I had. We don't have a ton of it yet, but any questions? I mean, I did learn a ton from this conference from Henry, knowing that now we're going to try and get all these fast chargers and things, and so I guess we're going that direction. I can't ignore it as much as I would like to, but. I know.
I like their approach better than ours.
Yeah. Yes. And then, like Troy and me, every time we talk to somebody like trained-wise, we're like, hey, what can you do for hybrid vehicles or electric vehicles? And like the lady from Wyotech said the other day, right now it's probably more of an awareness, right? We're not really going to tear into them yet, but you need to know, if this vehicle's rolled over, hey, don't cut that wire, or you get.
Real challenge, and the vendor community doesn't even have training out there that we can bring in.
There's one, the only one out there doing anything like our right now. So we've had them come in, they'll get in, show where the disconnect is. The training that we've got, they actually put the guys down and build circuits and how to test the circuits. I mean, it's good basic. When we first set it up for mechanics, they were like, we don't need to do EV stuff. Well, then they got in there, there's a lot of basic theory, and they made them think it through. And, the high voltages and everything else, and they've got actual cart test benches. And they go through, they pull in a bolt, show them where to disconnect it. The lightning, they pull the tub apart out of the front, show them where to disconnect it, the motors, the wires not to touch. And they've kind of done the same thing. There's also emergency responder training that GM puts on.
Oh, gotcha.
Where they've got a Hummer and some other stuff that's been wrecked and damaged, and they go in to the first responders on how you disconnect it to be safe, so you don't get lit up, and what cables
Right.
you can touch and what cables you can't touch.
So your shop base has to be bigger, right, for rooms, or? That's what I heard originally.
I mean, I haven't heard that.
Well, no, I'm just saying, they're saying you gotta have more room in your bays to keep people away from. That was some of the original stuff I remember hearing. So I just wonder if you guys are adjusting your shops at all, or?
No, and since you bring that up, we were gonna go into the CNG path, and that was a huge shop setup. You had to have explosion-proof wiring, you had to have 4 air changes per hour, that kind of a ventilation system. I mean, so I guess luckily we're not going down that path, but for EVs, I don't know, honestly. They haven't told us anything. Right now, we just take them back to the dealer and have them fix it.
Let's go back. When we did the training, we've got this Mohawk mobile lifts, and that's what he races with. He just, you know, here to here at home, and that was it. And the only time they did that when they were doing pictures, for propaganda pictures, to make sure they were safe, but when they were doing training in the shop, they did.
Yeah, because once you disconnect the battery, I mean, as long as it's not been in an accident, you know, where the battery cage is compromised, one of the first things they show you is how to disconnect that high voltage battery so that you don't have a fire issue or people touching an issue. If you're killing it instantly. There's a few more protocol when they've been in a collision to prevent, for lack of a better term, voltage leakage into the frame or the subframe of the car. But
Oh, gotcha.
it's really, this guy's really awesome. He's European background, so he's well advanced over what we have here in the United States. And he lives in Colorado, so he's.
Oh, wow,
he's
okay.
doing these trainings, he's building training for that particular thing.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely get a hold of you. Like I say, we're rolling it out pretty slow. I mean, so for 4 vehicles, it doesn't really, I mean, let the dealer deal with it.
Same with us, we won't touch them, really, to be honest, other than knowing how to make them safe.
My question for you guys is, how's the dealer response been when you had to take it into the workshop? What I've heard in my end of things from me personally, only one and following that end of things, most of the dealers don't even have the personnel training to be able to do the repairs properly to begin with. And like my formal training was through Ford. I started when battery electrics came out with Ford, and up until 2015 when I left, I was through that entire process. I know that that's been a real struggle. Most technicians don't want to work on their misnomers. If you talk to them, they'll be adamantly against turning a wrench on them. They'll be afraid about it. And so I think the biggest thing is trying to get people to understand that it's not just a magic box. You can work on it just like a gas motor and make that thing do what you need to do. And it is still perfectly safe. You know, a bunch of that comes out of bullet could blow up in my face.
Right.
Yes, but no. These systems are being designed now. When there's power down, that contactor is open in the back of that battery box. There is absolutely no chance that you're going to arc off. A lot of the protocols that they're coming up with, like in the accents and stuff, are just in case the systems have to come back online, and make sure that those contacts are closed. But I've heard this from Dodge dealerships that I've dealt with, I've heard it from Ford dealerships, even so much from GM dealerships. New group of technicians that's being trained don't want to work. And so as this stuff starts to come out, I think you guys are going to see the same thing, is I bring it in there and it sits 3 months at the dealership waiting for somebody to actually touch it.
Yeah, we've had 2 newer bolts. I think they were 2022s, and they had a recall, but it had nothing to do with the EV system. So the only experience I have is we took them over and they replaced, I want to say it was a wheel bearings or something totally unrelated to the powertrain. So I really don't have any feedback on that yet. But I'm sure, like you say, I mean, a lot of times our guys can figure stuff out even long before the dealership can. So it'd be nice to get out in front of it and get the training first. You know, I mean, it is electricity, and the guys do know how to work on electrical stuff. But like you said, there's that stigma in the back of your mind, like, holy cow, this is pretty powerful. I could get killed or shocked or whatever, get burned pretty bad working on it. Anything else? Okay. Yep.
I'll go get it over with.
I'm wearing glasses. I can't see.
Yeah, no, you warmed them all up for us. So while I'm digging around here, I did kind of wanted to reiterate some of what Jeff said about thanking the van drivers yesterday. That was awesome. And one of the things I've always appreciated about the Washima conferences is whether we're in a session like this or whether we're driving around, in a van somewhere in the dark between Helena. We're still building solidarity and learning to appreciate and build an understanding of our partners even more. So I really appreciated that. That said, there will be a non-disclosure agreement passed around a little later for whoever was in our van. And you all know why, so I don't need to talk. Yeah. There was, there's this, I'm not even going to go there. Yeah. EVs. So let's see. Like Utah, there is a lot in Oregon that we're still just kind of sorting out. However, we have our legislature, much like Washington and California, has been pretty aggressive with telling us how we're going to sort it out. But they didn't write a check to go along with that, so that's woven throughout. So you'll see some of the challenges that we face a little bit different than our partner states, but I think what we're learning, each of us as partner states, is going to help the others go through it. So hopefully some of the things we cover here will help you guys in your efforts to come. So I mentioned House bill legislation. Calendar year 2025, we have about 700 to 730 light fleet. We replace about 120 to 130 of those on average over a biennium. And beginning in calendar year 2025, 100% of new light fleet purchases are supposed to be EV or EV hybrids. So that's aggressive, and that's directly from the legislature. Now, they have thrown in there an if feasible. So obviously what we know about EVs, they're hard to get. So if we can't get them, that's one thing. We know they have limited range and limited capabilities. So if we can define why those capabilities won't work, then that's non-feasible. And then also, if we don't have chargers for them, non-feasible. But we have to justify all of that. So if we replace a vehicle that's not an EV, we have to have written justification for why it's not feasible. So we anticipate that there's going to be a lot of non-feasible, but we do have to do the very, very best we can because everything's going to be ran through them and through our administrative services for review. And so, but again, there was no additional money that came along with that. So right now, we're looking at $15,000 to $20,000 on average for an internal combustion vehicle cost versus the comparative vehicle in electric vehicles. So if you take that times the 100 plus that we try and replace everybody in, that's a pretty big number to come up with. That again, they didn't provide us funding to do. Also, every one of them has to have a charger. And right now, we're going to look at some of our average charger prices per head. And so those got to come along with it, and there's no funding for that as well. I really appreciate our new statewide maintenance engineer. He basically said when we were building this budget, he's like, if they didn't give us money for chargers, we're not installing any chargers. And I'm like, okay. So let's see how that works out for us. So really, EVs, I've always said this, we're not, as a state agency, we're not intended to be on the cutting edge of technology. That's not how we're built. We can't miss with anything. If we spend money on it, it's got to be a hit. We got to know we can count on it for 10, 15, 20 years. So if you want to give us money to test things out and to cycle them through and to really learn about them and to be really specific and purposeful about where we place them, that's great. But that's not the approach that our executive leadership in our state is taking. Do we have challenges with, emissions? Yes, absolutely. I understand everything that's motivating it. I just wish we would have been a little bit more purposeful about it. And so we're doing our best to try and help show progress, demonstrate progress, educate folks, and be purposeful all at the same time. So it's a little bit of a pacification exercise, which you won't see on any PowerPoint presentations. So, network about our chargers. So there you kind of see if we're going to do 120 vehicles on average, we're figuring we got to have at least 60 dual head chargers that are installed with this. So this kind of helps provide some of those numbers that I just talked about that aren't being funded currently. So $13,000 to $15,000 per dual charger head right now is about what we're averaging. We have a couple dozen to 40 that are installed. The projects are kind of ongoing, and so I don't know exactly what stage all of them are in, but we have a good number that we own. We install on our property. And that's a lot different than what you saw in the presentation with the NEVI stuff yesterday. You saw in if you want that NEVI funding, it has to be publicly accessible. And we don't want chargers that are publicly accessible because we need access to them all the time. So there's parallel efforts, at least in our state, and I'm sure there are in yours as well. There's this public charging effort that they want to, public charging and work with the government agencies, public-private partnerships, but also you're basically going to rebuild your liquid fuel program as a partner electric fuel program is what you're going to have to do. And I'm going to talk about that here in just a little bit. So 13 to 15,000 is without all of the electrical upgrades that you're going to need to your facilities. And if your facilities are anything like ours and the deferred maintenance is way up there, you're going to need a lot of electrical improvements just before you're ever going to even be able to charge or to install chargers. There's also the network charges. You don't want to leave these things. We don't want to make the mistakes of just having dumb chargers out there. You're going to want a networked charger that is compiling data for you, that you can manage the costs and manage the way that the rates are charged. Probably also going to want to have some kind of a surcharge in there so that you can fund your program like most of us do with our liquid fuels. So again, you're setting up an entire duplicate fueling system, and it all comes with a price tag. So again, I'm not going to read the slides, just kind of share some of the early numbers of what we're seeing. I just touched on this, a charge management system. So we talked yesterday about AssetWorks or whatever your fleet management system is. We're running AssetWorks. We got involved in a little bit, it's a special interest group that AssetWorks puts together, and it's kind of interesting if you hear the pitch on them. They'll be like, hey, we had a deal you can't pass up, We're going to put together this group to design this software that we're going to make lots of money on. And if you pay us 20 grand, we'll let you come sit on the panel. It sounds really sketch. Our procurement people thought it sounded really sketch. But because AssetWorks is a program we're committed to long-term, and charge management systems are in their infant stage, we wanted to get creative and we wanted to be on that special interest group or the SIG group that they were putting together because we wanted to help define how this charge management system was going to work, what data it was going to collect, how it was going to operate, what went on behind the Wizard of Oz curtain, so to speak. So we actually paid the money. Now the good thing about paying the money to be a part of this is they give you credit. They give you, I think it's 1.5 times whatever you pay. So we paid, $18,000, we get $24,000 or something like that in credit towards chargers and charge management system if we decide we want to implement it. But remember when I said there's a module? This is going to be a module for all you AssetWorks folks out there. This is a module for that. So anyway, it was a little bit of a unique approach that we took. We were able to get it through procurements. We have a firecracker of an individual who is our statewide EV program coordinator, brand new position. That is one thing that we were able to get as far as funding is that position. So Amy Regenball, you can reach out to Megan or myself if any of you guys just want some information. You want to know how our program's going so far. She is a wonderful asset. She'll blow your socks off with her energy, her passion, and her knowledge. She's got some national and regional awards that she's won for her efforts. So she's more than willing to help however she can. She's been a big part of this SIG, helping develop this dashboard that you see here behind us and the logistics that are going to go into building a charge management system. So again, we kind of talked about a lot of this stuff right here. The slides are just kind of prompting me along with what we want to cover, but it's a lot more complicated than it first looks. It really is. We'll throw some chargers out there and people will plug into them, and there's a lot that goes into it if you want to build a plan like Jeff talked about and be purposeful in your approach to it. So one of the things I'll share a little bit of our logic and the data analysis that went into it for us, and Amy's got this as a click-through slide here. So we took a look at to best understand where and how we can place EVs, we took a look at our current practices with the internal combustion engines that we have. So we looked at vehicle counts, basically our vehicle density. So what addresses, what locations have a high density of light fleet? And you guys all know those, your region headquarters, your district headquarters, however you guys are divided up. So that was pretty straightforward, but we wanted to get it all mapped out. So we mapped our light fleet density out there. So we were like, if we're going to make a charger investment, let's invest in chargers in the locations where we'll get the biggest bang for our buck. So that was the beginning of the logic there. Then we analyzed the fuel transactions. So if you're going to replace it with an EV, we're going to assume that generally speaking, their fueling patterns aren't going to change, or they're not going to want them to change. They're going to want to fuel generally the same way. So we have our light fleet density across our state, and now we have our fuel purchases and density. And so we just lump those. The areas with the bigger the dot, the brighter the color, the more fueling takes place in those areas and those locations. So it means we're going to need more chargers in those locations in the future. So it's not overly complicated, but the data set just kind of kept moving along and really helped us inform. And this is one of the areas where I think telematics and AVL is going to separate fact from fiction. Your users out there almost always think they use it more than they do. And this will be able to tell you specifically. Your AVL will tell you trip data. It'll tell you overall utilization, miles, all that kind of stuff. And it's really going to help you, especially in the early stages where we have limited range. It's going to say, yeah, you know what, your average trip is really 80 miles and you're fueling within this 100-mile radius. You're getting an EV, and it makes sense. So this data is going to help us. The ongoing collection and commitment that we've made to AVL and telematics is also going to help us be, and the word we keep trying to use with folks is purposeful. We can't miss. When we place one, we got to know that it's going to work, so you got to have the data to inform you that it will. That's what Amy was talking about here with trip data and trip information through our GeoTab and GoFleet programs. Again, I touched on this, just got a little ahead of the slides here, but we have a lot of folks who, like, well, an EV will never work for me. I drive 400 miles every day, and it's like, no, you don't. So this is going to help us with that. Again, more utilization information. This just kind of shows, she ran a report on a specific vehicle, showed their utilization pattern, fuel pattern. Also, the AVL devices are going to get you charging information. So if it's on an EV, they'll be able to tell you when they're plugged in, how long they're plugged in, what charge rate they're at, when they're full, when they're half. So it's going to be an invaluable tool in managing these kind of atypical oddball assets as we start getting them in our fleet. I mentioned already the charge management software. I do think this is, everybody's trying to position themselves. Everybody out there in the industry is trying to position themselves. You're seeing partnerships with fleet management tools and chargers and AVL devices. They're all trying to build partnerships so they can carve out their little corner of the market. There's even folks who are trying to make the easy button right now. I'm sure you guys have been approached. I'm sure Washington, Utah, they'll come in and it's pay to play. It's just like, hey, we'll build you a charging program, chargers. We'll manage your charging program, and all you got to do is pay us, and we'll do it. And they're pretty aggressive, but there's a lot of that's up and coming right now. For a lot of reasons, we're really, really cautious. It sounds really, really cool. It's just like, yeah, we'll just write you a check every month. But I think we all know how that's going to play out in time. Those prices are just going to continue to go up. But they have some really novel concepts that they'll come in, they'll manage them as a private public-private partnership so that the public does have access to them, but they'll make sure that you have spots reserved for when and where you need them. And so they're there to make money off them, and so they'll manage them accordingly. But it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And it might be perfectly acceptable for some smaller states who don't have large fleets, or some smaller agencies that don't have large light fleets. It might make sense for them. Infrastructure, we talked a lot about that. So lessons learned, I'll just wrap up here real quick. The technology's changing fast. If you can get, like I said, the challenge for us is that pacification exercise. We're trying to let folks know that we're not blowing this off. We're not overly enthusiastic about it, but we're not blowing it off. We can't afford to miss. If we're going to invest, we got to know that this stuff is going to work. And the technology hasn't proven that yet. I mean, we were talking yesterday about, is a Ford Lightning going to work if you put a variable message sign on top of that and some emergency vehicle lights? What kind of range can you expect out of it? We weren't aware that the temperature impacted them so much. We thought it would, but we hadn't experienced that yet. So that was great information for us to hear. So technology is changing fast. Also with the charging systems, it's changing fast. So do your best to stay current with that. Use our partnerships and our relationships in here and ask those questions. I think that's going to be one of the biggest assets that we all have, is to be able to pull information from our partner agencies and point to what others are doing and what has been successful. So, and that's my second bullet there, is we need to continue to remain collaborative as we approach this. Grants for government fleets, there's a lot of those out there. Henry mentioned some of those yesterday through the NEVI program. We're going to have a hard time competing. That's been our experience, as we've submitted for DEQ series of grants every year they've been available. We just have a hard time competing with the private sector when it comes to those. And so we have not been awarded a dime on any of those. And we've been relatively aggressive about our approach to applying for those. But there are some out there. We have had success with public-private partnerships with our charging infrastructure. So we partnered with PGE in Oregon, one of our power providers, and there's a formal agreement that's written up, but they bear a lot of the upfront costs and improvements to install the electrical capacity, and then we install the chargers later, and we agree that we're going to have this many chargers installed, and we agree that, there's some ways in there that their costs are covered, but it works out well for us because we only had to come up with about a third of the total project cost. Then we can incrementally install these chargers over time to meet that agreement. So there is some good things out there. Any way you look at it, it's expensive. We keep hearing that, EV costs are going to come down. That has not been our experience. They continue to, in my opinion, to build and market for private use. We want all the bells and whistles. Darrin wants his seat heater. And so everything comes with all the bells and whistles. If you can get them, they're going to be all pimped out. And so that's not a good look for us at all. And develop your standards early. This has been a challenge for us, as I know. You're getting pushed and guided and prompted by the legislature, but you still have to take half a step back to create the standards of how you're going to use them and when you're going to use them. That's why I was so happy to see, Jeff, your flow chart. Megan was laughing because we have a very similar thing, that this is how we're going to go through the process of considering, is it appropriate here? Is it not appropriate? And if we're going to buy, if you would normally get an SUV, then you're going to get this SUV right here. And so it, kind of rocks our world a little bit. So again, being purposeful, creating those standards early. Get your contracts out there as well. We have a statewide contract that's being prepped for the purchase of chargers through our Department of Administrative Services. And that's been 18 months in the works. But if you're not buying a consistent charger that has consistent capabilities, and you go to network those, it'll be a miss, a swing and a miss. So you got to kind of, again, that's one thing where Amy's been really good at. The other things is your facilities. Your facilities folks will get prompted, and I don't know about you, but we don't work great with our facilities folks. There's always coordination challenges. And so they'll be getting prompted, they'll be getting pressure, so they'll plan a facilities project and they're going to install chargers, and nobody's ever talked to you. And so now you don't know if that charger is going to work with your program. You don't know if it's going to integrate or network with all your other stuff. So get with your facilities folks right away and create that standard. Chargers need to be X, they need to be able to do Y, and they'll appreciate it, and they'll set you up for success too. So I know that was fast and furious, but Walt was giving me the stink eye, so. Questions, comments? More to come. Oh gosh, I think Amy she's really the one to know, but she just recently kind of took a statewide tour to talk a little bit, and I think her trip, it was like $15 for, it's not all that much. But again, it depends on the time that you charge, because energy costs more at different times. And so like Jeff was talking about, if you go through there, peak midday and want to charge, you're going to pay more.
I had to charge my truck at fast charger, 49 kilowatts on it, it cost me $19.
Yeah.
So the big hang up there too,
No.
because this is in the infancy, to answer that question again, I increases rapidly.
And that's gonna vary based on who owns the charging station right now.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
20 to 80 here on level 2 is roughly $30. That's me actually using several around here.
Yeah, and this was a level 3, because so when we're talking about level 2s and level 3s, the level 2s basically an overnight charger. Even though they say it's about anti-fire, when you start doing the math, it's really, it's an overnight charger. And these were level 3s, and those are much more expensive to do it in, much like, the difference when you're talking about 13 or 15,000 was a level 3 charger for 60 kilowatts, like 50,000.
Oh, yeah, it's like 3 times that, yeah.
Before it's installed, so then it's another.
Yep,
Probably 15 to 20 to have it installed because it requires,
yep. Each-
a transformer.
And we passed legislation that you have to have a certain certificate now to be able to install them, and so those guys are gonna charge even more. And if you need electrical upgrades, you're, like 20, 30, 40,000 more for those yeah, so it adds up quick. And then they'll want to recover that cost, Troy. So if they have a level 3 charger, they're going to charge you a lot more. But the best, we got to have our own charge systems if we're really going to have a fleet of these things, and we can manage the costs a lot more effectively. So.
Yeah, and then the parking fees just keep people from camping out there.
I knew California was going to have all that other stuff, so I kind of took a different approach to this. So the state guidance, we've got a lot of the same stuff that Oregon has, California has. Even though we've got that guidance with those milestones, it's like, no, if there's an EV available, you're going to get it, period. So 22 and 23, that was kind of the stance we took for FY 22 and 23, was if there's an EV, which Lightning was out there at the time, you're going to get it. So all of our trucks, we were ordering as battery electric trucks. And the guidance we got was find a place to fit it. If it doesn't fit the person that's getting it, he may get another used vehicle, and you're going to put that electric vehicle where it makes sense, that kind of stuff. But we had, as of 22 and 23, we had 105 trucks on order. I have 6. So, and 2 just showed up last month. And the first 4 showed up like November. So that's kind of where we're sitting. So based on that guidance, you will get EVs. And because of all those delays in 24, they actually let us go through a waiver process and request waivers because of the charging taking so long to put in, the trucks taking so long to deliver, and they actually let us cut our order in half. So we've got, out of the 10 trucks we're due for 24, 6 of those are going to be power boost, is what they're going to, because we justified that in there. There's like a 3-page Google sheet that we have to submit to request a waiver, and the agency that handles that is our Colorado Energy Office, which we call CEO. They're the ones that's kind of acting on behalf of the governor as approving those waivers or disapproving those waivers. And based on the fact that we actually had this truck in our possession and could put some real world issues that we were facing with it as far as range and charging stations, that's how we got the waivers through for that. So if it was a maintenance vehicle, we got waivers for it. If it was an engineering vehicle or some other sort of administrative vehicle, we went ahead and went with BEVs again. So we got, out of the 6 we've got, 4 of them are extended range. The last 2 we got are standard range. For whatever reason, Ford decided they weren't going to do an extended range to the government agencies. Again, Darrin talked about it, this kind of more, I can get more money for the extended range from the private sector in a platinum than I can selling it to you guys. So that was some of the challenges we had. Our vehicle count overall is like we've got 12 bolts, which we've had for years. So we've got 18 fully battery electric vehicles in our light fleet. And that's just for Colorado DOT. We have another agency that manages our light fleet, which is what we call state fleet management. So they're the ones that we have to request all the permissions to get everything through. We have 92 hybrid trucks, which I loosely use the term hybrid because the Rams are those light hybrids. I don't really consider those hybrids, but the governor for our counts of meeting the EV initiatives of zero EVs or the near zero EVs like California talked about, they count. So I'm like, whatever, that works for us. And we did get 6 power boost. Those they tend to like. That's the one, for those of you not familiar, that's got the 7.2 2 kilowatt generator on it. So you can actually run welders, a 220 outlet off the back of those things with that generator on it. So that, I think, better fits as a true hybrid because it's got the onboard generator, it's got an onboard battery, and we can work out of the truck. That, to me, that makes a good work truck with that generator. Our bridge crew guys had one. They got denied repairs. We gave it to them, and they before we gave it to them, we had a CNG truck we tried to give them. They're like, well, that won't work because we got our toolbox and our generator. I'm like, I got a solution for that. And so they took it and loved it because now they just put a toolbox, and instead of carrying an extra generator around, they run it off the truck. So that's kind of a good success story. PEVs, we got 41 plug-in hybrids. Those are anything from a Mitsubishi Outlander to a Ford Fusion plug-in hybrid. And then we've got like 157 non-plug-in hybrids. Those are the Highlanders, the RAV4s, and the Fusions that are non-plug-in. I mentioned the waiver process. Part of the waiver process, and see if this works for me now here, is we have to pull a suitability report out of Geotab, and I pulled one of those in so I can kind of show you guys what that looks like. And this ties into, it'll probably take a little bit to open, but it ties into what Darrin was talking about. The guy's like, yeah, I drive 400 or 500 miles, I do this and do that, and it won't work. Then when you pull the suitability report, then it kind of, watch it not work up here. It doesn't tend to work out for them. Oh, there it is. So let me just figure out how to get to the pointer there. Well, I just bumped myself out of there. Let me do it this way then. It's amazing when you do it. I've tested this in the room a couple times to make sure it worked before I came up here, and then you get up here and it doesn't work like it's supposed to. Or I wasn't smart enough to find it where it was at on the screen. That's probably the problem. All right, so this is our report in our EV range. So this is how the report comes out. You can put in here your daily, that not. Figure out which one's showing now. Well, let me go back to it anyway. Well, we'll move on. Anyway, the report pulls up and it'll show, I can show it to you guys once I figure it out rather than waste your time sitting here. It'll show actually green. It'll list everything that goes into the miles that they've driven for the day, like Darrin mentioned. That you factor in charging stations, like we set up geofences or zones for all of our charging stations, and it'll tell like how far they traveled near that charging station or close to a charging station where they could have charged. Within state-owned charging stations as well as non-state-owned charging stations, and it factors all that in when it looks in to see if it's suitable to be used as a battery electric vehicle. It factors in dwell time, and it gives you how many trips it traveled outside of the EV range. There's a field in there where you can adjust your EV range that you want of the vehicle, so it factors all that in. You can go up or down with that, and it takes that into account. We pulled that up, that report I was trying to show you, but we pulled it at a 200-mile range for the Lightnings, and out of the 880 trucks we had, there were like 5 of them that were in the red that didn't meet a viable EV replacement solution. So that was I thought that was pretty interesting. And usually that's the thing that when we go for the waiver process that the CEO office is going to see. We have to provide that data. We went with the waiver process. The vehicles didn't meet the non EV, that it met the qualifications to be an EV suitable replacement. But what we did is not the dwell time, but 14 hours on the road during the snow shifts. That data is what they allowed us to use as the waiver to keep from making those as EVs, because our guys are out chasing the plow trucks in the big storm that we had, and the amount of time that they spent actually on the snow, pulling motorists out, following the plow trucks and that kind of stuff. So that was additional data we had to add to it to justify it. The second thing that's coming out, or there's a current executive order that's coming out with more guidance, and they're starting to hit lawn maintenance equipment. That's our next challenge. I've got people trying to get an account of all of our weed whackers, chainsaws, leaf blowers, push mowers, small riding mowers. And so now they're going to write that into an executive order that, especially in the non-attainment area, that there will be no gas-driven lawn maintenance equipment. If we write any lawn maintenance contracts for CDOT or for the state, they have to say that the vendor will use battery-operated equipment. The old executive order they had to have a certain percentage in it, but now the new executive order is going to push it, and they're going to start in the non-attainment area, which is the counties here on the map, which is mostly our Front Range area. It's kind of Castle Rock, which is just south of Denver, all the way up into Fort Collins, which will be just a little bit farther north than where we're planning to do the show next year. So that's the newest challenge with the EV stuff that's going on with us. We look at it, at least in the Denver Front Range area, it's not going to be that big a deal, because all the Lowe's, the Home Depots, and all those guys are starting to get away from the gas-operated equipment, sell electric equipment anyway. So it shouldn't be that big of a deal. The biggest pain is getting accounts for the governor rep, because they're wanting to get additional funding to pay for this stuff. But you guys know as well as I do, trying to count all of those sheds, leaf blowers and weed eaters and all that stuff, the challenge that is. So that's kind of my current fight, or not current fight, but trying to pull that data from the superintendents right now is a challenge. A little bit on our charging system. We went into this, we were thinking that because we had all those plug-in hybrids and everything, that we thought we were good on charging until we got the Lightnings in, and realized that the Lightnings that the small level 2 chargers that we had are not sufficient. So we started changing to a higher output level 2 and DC fast chargers. So currently we've got 35 stations and 65 ports just for CDOT, and statewide there's 95, which is nowhere near what California has, 95 stations and 158 ports. So the primary one we had going into this was the ChargePoint, that little 30 amp, 7.2 kilowatt charger. So from now on, our at least standard level 2 charger is going to be the 80 amp ChargePoint charger, and then DC fast chargers. We're looking to put the fast chargers at like our regional headquarters. Guys come in for meetings, do the meetings, and they need to get back out or whatever. So that way they can plug it in while they're in the meeting. They got enough charge to go back. We did have someone that left from Denver, went down to Pueblo in a Bolt, plugged into one of our light, our 32 amp chargers, went to the meeting, came back out expecting to be able to get back to Denver, and there wasn't even enough to get out of Pueblo. So we've learned from there that we've got to strategically place those fast chargers in those types of locations. The 80 amp chargers, we're looking to put those in all of the foremen, the senior foreman, supervisor areas, and wherever we've got highway junior foremen or that take the trucks in their yards where they'll be able to charge while they're in the office. The big thing that I've learned from the Lightning that I'm driving is if it's parked, it needs to be on a charger. It's got to charge overnight in order to get the range and be feasible out of those. That's kind of a challenge, is have enough charging to do that. Some of the challenges I've faced with the off-site chargers, like Darrin hit on it about the cards and the connectivity. I've had tested out a charging DC fast charger that was supposedly in our network for the ChargePoint cards that we use. It worked in like February when I first tested out. Rob and I went somewhere and looked at a manufacturing facility, came back, I'm like, yeah, it's fine, I can plug in the fast chargers down there. Well, our card quit working with that company. So whatever partnership they had was severed, and no one ever got the notice. So then I was scrambling. I needed a DC fast charger, and there wasn't one available. Or they were available, but we couldn't tag into them. So that's a challenge too with the cards. And we've had the discussions about, okay, do we tie it in with our WEX fuel card and WEX charges, but there's fees along with that. So we get WEX to work with all the charging stations, but there's some additional fees that go along with that. Or do we just set up accounts with all these different charging stations, and now you're carrying more DC, more of the RFI readers for the additional charging stations on the key. You know, those aren't going to last on keys very long. And now you've got additional databases you've got to go to with those other charge cards to figure it out. So those are a lot of the challenges. I think Darrin mentioned a lot of that we're seeing firsthand. Currently, we've got about a little over 2 million in installs going on right now. So we've got 26 of those 80 amps and 4 DC fast chargers. Now, those we were able to get, there was a House bill that came out, so we were able to get grant money. That didn't cost us anything. There was a grant that paid for all of these. We're currently doing a study on another 20 80 amp chargers and 16 DC fast chargers. And there is a grant out there that we can get. It's a 50-50 match. We're in the process of doing the site assessments to figure out how much it's going to actually cost us. We're estimating a little over 2 million for those charging stations to get installed. So, like Darrin said, it's not cheap, and without the grants or the additional funding, it takes a big hit. We're doing the same thing, kind of like you mentioned with your power company. Xcel Energy does what we call make ready. So they'll bring the power up to our property, and then and it's no cost to us. They're getting grants from somewhere for that. So what we have to do is we have to pay from where they bring the make ready into our facilities. And that's kind of what the cost it hit to us, as well as the installing of the chargers. Home charging, I do currently have one commuter with his vehicle. He takes it home. He's got a charging station at his home, so he can charge at home. It's a small level 2, and our Colorado Energy office is paying for those. So they came in, put in the wiring. We paid, I think, $500 for the charger to plug into it, and then now he charges at home. It used to be he would charge in the office. He said now that he's got the one at home, he doesn't even charge in the office. He charges at home and makes his runs. So part of that program is we will reimburse the employee for the electricity that he's used. So the state fleet management has set 2 rates. They've set one if they're in Black Hills Energy, which is one of our providers, is our highest provider. They'll pay 17 cents per kilowatt based on them, the average that they did a study across the state. All the other agencies, they pay them like 14 cents a kilowatt. And it's one of those that, okay, this is what we're paying you. So you either charge peak hours or off peak hours. You know, it's up to you. But if you charge on peak hours and it costs you more than that 17 cents, that's on you. So we're still learning a whole lot with this one employee having his at home. So what happens is we'll pull a report out of Geotab, and I had that report too, but since that's not working, I'm not going to try it yet. So it'll pull up and it'll show in the AVL system how much he's charged, his state of charge beginning, state of charge when he ends, and how many kilowatts went into that vehicle from his house. So then we'll take that formula and reimburse him based on that usage for his pay. So we're got the one pilot that we're working out all the kinks for that one. Once these other trucks show up, then we've got probably 30 highway supervisors that take vehicles home that will jump into this program once we get all the kinks worked out with this first employee. Reimbursement charging, since we pay, all of our vehicles are leased from another state agency, that state fleet management agency. So we're charging on our charging stations, so they reimburse us for the charging that we do on it, and then we're working through the process on that. So they'll pull the same thing, they'll pull a report out of Geotab that shows how many vehicles we charged, the kilowatts, and then they're reimbursing that money back to us. So that's going to go into account that we're looking to use to pay for our future maintenance, future upgrades, and we're kind of building a maintenance account for that. Currently, we have employee charging, kind of California mentioned it a little bit, where employees can charge on our charging stations. So they're open and free. So the public also sees those on those apps, and they'll come in and plug into our charging stations for free. So we're looking at changing that. Initially, we're gonna start charging employees. If we've got charging stations, we've got some that are inside our fenced areas that we're gonna just cut off to the public, period. And then some that are on our facilities, but they're outside of fence. So we'll leave those open to the public, but we'll charge them to charge on our charging stations. And again, all those funds will go into our maintenance fund to try and help maintain the maintenance contracts or future growth. I'm charging. I think that's all I had, unless you can think of anything I missed.
On the licensing side,
No, that's it. If you guys got any questions for me. Sweet, thanks.
I have one question, but it's kind of for the group.
Yeah.
So, like Walt was talking on the first day, we track our PMCs by operating hours and miles and stuff like that. So I was just kind of sitting here thinking, and I'm no mechanic, so maybe it's this obvious, but with these light duty vehicles, we usually have the PMs based off operating miles, but when we're talking about electric vehicles, is there a way that they are tracking kilowatts being pumped into them? Because then they might be taking more charges on and being used more as idling in there, so they're not accumulating miles, but they are being used in a way that might need some PMs done on it. Maybe not exactly the mechanical way of operating, going down the highway, but some type of maintenance done on those vehicles.
So, but the Lightning that I drive, that one in the picture, I've hit the first service on it. So we're still tracking it by miles. That first service was rotate the tires and check the brakes, and that's it. That was the only part of that service.
How are you getting the odometer down?
That we're pulling off a geotab. So our state fleet management used to be like each agency would go into the system and upload our meter readings. Now they're pulling everything out of geotab, and then so what they'll do is they'll load everything in geotab. They'll give us a chance to look at it before they upload everything into their system, so we can make adjustments based on that. But we're pulling everything out of the AVL, and we're looking to transfer that over to the heavy fleet because we have guys fat finger stuff so much. But yeah.
Or just don't care?
Yep. Well, no, yeah, we'll get that. Or I've had guys. I had one. The guy put 1 million miles instead of 100,000, and that really wreaks havoc on your PM plan. But
how are you guys doing unifying PMs?
For the EVs, we're a little behind on that. Honestly, they're not being utilized very much, most of them are in pools, little motor pools, and they're so underutilized that we deal with the underutilization challenge more than the PM challenge.
yeah.
But we're behind on that.
Yeah, the first 4 trucks we got, I've got 3 of them and people that are using them on a daily basis. The 4th one was, we do all our stuff white, and the Parks and Wildlife guys had a gray one that they ordered, but for some reason, we ordered them first. All of our orders got canceled. Parks and Wildlife and our Department of Agriculture got their orders in, so State Fleet split them up so everyone could get some in to test them because of the issues of getting them in. And one of them was a gray one, and I'm like, no, I don't want the gray one. And my boss was like, no, we don't want to turn them down. So we got it and signed it to our executive director. And she drove it a little bit, but our chief engineer is the one that's driving it the most. But still, that one's, we've had them since November. That one's probably got 3,000. The other 3 are well over 12, 14,000 miles.
One of the first things we did was, and our the executive management team and when that Lightning first came in and was set up, it immediately started going out to these long trips. Grand Junction, Alamosa, to prove that, try to stop the rumors of, well, that it won't work for us. So, Durango was a 700-mile trip. I drove to Durango, I've driven to Grand Junction several times, and you can't get back if you don't find charging stations. So even though it was a challenge, we had to use public charging stations at the time, we were able to prove quite easily
Yeah.
that this is a viable machine.
How much downtime on those long trips though? If you're a public station, you could have been productive. How much time were you spending charging?
I spent 3 hours charging. So it extended my trip by, I still got an 8-hour trip to turn into a 1 hour day.
Yeah, I can tell you I hate it when the boss takes it because that downtime means emails and phone calls to us. Yeah.
The light fleet seems to be easier to adopt than anything up to a half ton. It's really easy to adopt. We did buy 2 mobile and 4 sweepers. I kind of poked around with that on GeoCab. They've had to completely redesign that machine for us. So it's not been a shining, glorious moment of a success story. But they just got back into Colorado on Monday, so I'm really excited to come back out and do this.
Yeah, we're talking this stuff. We haven't even hit the heavy fleet stuff. So we've got that where feasible language in there too. Our heavy fleet stuff, I think it's 2040, we're supposed to be 100% purchase zero emission vehicles. So what we've done is we're looking at, well, we tried these brooms, which so far they've been a complete flop. We're hoping that straightens out. We did hybrid aerial lift trucks. So we've done those. They run off a battery while the hydraulics are running. It keeps the cab conditioned while they're running because we knew if we did it battery and it was hot, the guys were going to run it anyway for the AC, or if it's cold, they're going to run it for the heat. We managed the heat and AC is incorporated in the battery system, so they can pull up, shut off, and run battery, and they still keep the cab warm or cold while they're working. The guys that we had are electricians that like them. They liked them because they were quiet, they weren't sucking diesel, and they could communicate with the guys on the ground, and they could hear what was going on. So we got buy-in off of that right away. That was an easy win. Yes, yeah, they've worked very well.
Yeah, the fuel economy, that's what we noticed right away was
Yeah.
the fuel economy reports and increased by a couple miles a gallon.
You get reduced repair, like emission systems, because that's what they're at.
Yeah, they're not idling so much. We also took and put solar panels on our attenuator trucks because they sit there, they set the cones and it sits in the work zone. So we put solar panels and an extra battery pack to run the lights while they're in the work zone to try and keep them from idling. And I've heard from superintendents that they've pulled up and the guys have them shut off and they're running the lights. Now, whether they're just blowing smoke or that's a fact, I don't know. So we're looking at things like that to meet the goals of reducing the greenhouse gases. And we're looking at stuff like the mowers. We looked at some all battery electric mowers. Even before we started getting this mandate, we were looking at those. We looked at John Deere has a hybrid bucket truck, but if you look at the hybrid loader, but when you look at the hybrid loader compared to the conventional loader, there's no difference in the miles per hour, or the fuel economy is the same. So we're like, why are we going to pay 60 grand more for a hybrid that's really not getting any benefit? The construction equipment, a lot of stuff starting to come out electric. Skid steers, if they work like they're saying, I know Bobcat has one, but I have yet to find it or be able to find out what it costs. So those are things that go out and come home that shouldn't impact our operations. So we're looking at those things so they stay away from asking about plow trucks and that kind of stuff. So.
We got kind of burned. I don't want to say burned. That's the wrong term. These global sweepers, they promised 11 hours run time, 11 hour start time, and the first day out the gate was about 3 hours of run time and spending. And then they just went round and round and round. So we really, when someone comes in and says, "Hey, we're telling you it's going to do this," like, okay, prove it. Show us that that's going to do that. We're just not going to believe you.
Yeah.
Because and they learned a lot from us too. They didn't anticipate those rooms getting out on the highway and doing 60 miles an hour to a location. And that's where 90% of the consumption will be taken, so those things like a break. They're not aerodynamic at all. But lessons learned across the board on the medium and heavy duty stuff. So we're put the brakes on. Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, now I got the report pull up. This is kind of the suitability report. So over here is the daily mileage for that threshold.
You can adjust this based on whatever you think your range is on your EVs. And that's the other thing, these Lightnings, like right now, when I unplug it, I'll have anywhere from 320 to 339, range. Wintertime, it's 220 at best. So we're losing 35% of those in the wintertime. We have tried different things where you can program the cab to, while it's plugged into shore power, it will condition the cab. Like you can set it like 30 minutes, 45 minutes before you want to leave while it's still plugged into power. And that way it'll heat up your cab or cool your cab without drawing from your drive battery on the vehicle. So that helps a little bit, and just figuring out the timing. But pulling this report, it gives you everything, and at the green, it'll give you the codes, green, yellow, or red, whether, yellow with some changes in habits, it'll work. Green, yeah, it's gonna work, no problems. And then red is like, yeah, you may want to consider something else. But
Do you guys create this report, or do you have Geotech do it?
our state fleet, there's a canned version in there, but our state fleet worked with Geotab, their provider, to have them create this report. So this one, and then also the other one I've got, now that I figured out how to get it open, I'll show you if I can find it. And this is also a charging event report that they created that it runs. So this is the one that they use to reimburse us on. So it'll give you total kilowatts that was put into it. The neat thing about this one is the stuff that's not connected, like the dumb chargers. We bought 6 80 amp dumb chargers for those sweepers. This report will pick those up. My boss took a bolt home and plugged it into 110, and it picked it up. So any charging, any energy that goes into that vehicle, this report will pick it up. So, and this was another one. They've got a canned version, but again, our guys helped work with Geotab to generate a one that more fit what they wanted.
I think that's one of the things where we can really help each other. Is that we have different third-party vendors than you. I forget what whoever said yours was. But
Yeah.
There's Blue Line.
Blue Arrow.
Blue Arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should be having a similar report and
Yeah.
duplicating efforts.
Yeah, and we pull a similar report, like our home charging guy will pull a similar report, and our Department of Revenue has been doing it for a year or so with plug-in hybrids. Well, this is a totally different animal. They were just giving them an extra plug in their house to plug in the plug-in hybrid. We're actually putting charging stations in the people's house, and part of the rule is, all right, so they have to go through an orientation with the CEO. They've got requirements on home insurance that they need to maintain. They need to own their home. And if they get through all those hurdles, then they kind of come to agreement. All right, we're going to install it. If you leave employment with CDOT, the wiring stays in, but the charging station comes back to the agency. So.
And this report is these are really accurate, but it's not 100% accurate because there's a certain amount of energy that comes out of the charging station to power up the onboard chargers and monitor those things that the vehicle does not register as kilowatts consumed.
Energy in, yeah.
So I don't know exactly what that is quite yet. We haven't really got down the weeds and figure out what that is, but I can't imagine it being more than 1 or 2% off. Yeah,
Yeah.
Discussions with them, we shared visions of like a dashboard type view that would be really consumable, that would even translate it into carbon reduction, footprint reduction. So for the reports that we have, we demand and they said, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
But this will help to be able to point to something because you guys are about 2 steps ahead of us.
Yeah.
And regardless of the third party, if Geotab's involved, we should be able to.
Yeah, Geotab can do it. It's just, and they're all supposed to help us create these reports instead of having us flounder out there to do them. So that's the nice thing, because I'd have been in there pulling the can, and I've pulled their can version of some of these, and it's like the suitability report. Their can version tells you total cost of ownership. You got to put the cost of the vehicle in there, and it factors all that in. Well, I don't know about you guys, but for us, total cost of ownership, the governor doesn't care. I don't care about cost of ownership. I care about the reduction in the zero emissions and all that stuff. That's what matters. So our state fleet manager went through that early on, like, well, it doesn't make sense. These cost more, and the total cost of ownership's not there. And they're like, I don't care. It's reducing emissions. That's what matters.
Right now.
Yeah.
Do you guys get special funding for your charging infrastructure or?
We did. There was a House bill that passed within the state, and our CEO managed it. I think they got like $5 million. We got the $2 million out of that. and that covered our first round that we're still working on getting the installs. We were behind getting them up because of that line extension, so and that was more of a contracting issue. And XL says, oh, we only want one signature on the contract. Our contracting says, no, we have to sign two. So they went back and forth for 6-7 months over one signature or two signatures. You know, it's the political bureaucracy above us. And we're like, I just want charging stations in. And I'm kind of thankful that all the trucks, because I've got 47 more Fords due in October. This is all still part of that 22-23 order. And then 55 Chevys due in January. And I'm glad all that stuff, as far as the charging goes, because we had to plan, like, the charging will be here, we'll be okay. Well, then the charging didn't come, and then the trucks didn't come. We're like, well, it's a good thing the trucks aren't coming because we're still not there with the charging. So, but we're finally starting to we got through all the who can sign, how to do the contracts. We got through that, so we should be able to get charging stations. We're starting to make progress. Actually, I think our first DC fast charger went up into the Greeley area to get installed, which is good because I'm sending them one of these 6 trucks that I just got.
And they're all network, all your charging?
The charge points are, and that's our primary that we buy as the charge point chargers. So those are all networked, they're all connected. The only one we have is like the 6 that we bought with the sweepers, because we bought those early on. And we figured, all right, that's heavy fleet, that's outside the light fleet stuff. And we haven't even, you know, talked infrastructure for the heavy stuff yet, you know.
So on the equipment side, I don't think we've got any help with the light fleet vehicles. I don't know, that's not my ground, but the 2 sweepers we bought, we were partaking in Volkswagen Super Fund.
Yeah, that,
So that was an 8% deal, I think.
Yeah.
In your opinion, those have not been successful?
no.
So we're getting pushed.
Not yet. Now, we'll see if they've changed. Part of the problem is they're in New York, City of Fort Collins bought one, and City and County of Denver bought one, and they got theirs before ours, but they're local. So we're on the highway, so Global thought they were doing us a favor and put a larger motor, changed some other stuff for highway because we're on the highways. Well, they're saying that's where they made the mistake, and that's why they took it back to California, reworked, totally replaced motors, or went back to the original motors, did some different stuff with programming for the heating and cooling, that kind of stuff. So we're gonna watch these real close and see if we're getting what we thought we were getting in the beginning. But
You want to lower them brooms when they're going up back to Oregon, you know how it goes.
yeah, there you go. But yeah, those I would definitely not jump on those yet. Let's see what they do when they change ours, and let's see what, you know, I was telling Rob all the time, I said, they got to fix it now. California's got POs. They got to get us straight.
And
So.
they stopped production on those sweepers until they got ours figured out. It was such a black eye for them too. So they were like, no, we're not going to build anything else until we get you guys figured out. And that's costing them a lot of money, but they've got our room, they've had it in California since March. And they've had it in their possession since November. So we've been without it for, we're coming up close to 10 months. And it's, they even now, they're like, well, we're not even going to be able to match the 11 hours that we advertise, but we'll get you a shift on 8 hours. Okay, check it out.
Yeah, they got to get us more than 3. So.
Schwartz has got a sweeper out off on the M2, on the electric M2 chassis. That was all $1 million.
That one we're a little more interested in because it's got the drive battery for the chassis, and then they've got a whole different battery system that runs the sweeper part. So, whereas ours, everything's running off the drive battery, the sweeper and the drive of the sweeper is running off of that. So.